Simone, you support me wholeheartedly, and I love our
Sorry, guys, I do this every time. All right, let's start over. Hey, guys, it's your legal bestie, attorney Simone. And this is Girl Is That Legal. Today's episode is all about everything you need to know about Jay-Z's new lawsuit in under 30 minutes. Now, I was just saying earlier, you could go to my website, which is simoneredwine.com. And when you go there, you can book a consult with me. I'll just share that screen really briefly. Here we are. Book attorney Simone. There you can get a consult. They start at just $149 for half an hour. And there are consults all across America. It doesn't matter. I can assist you with your legal matter there. And if by chance I can't, I do refund you your money immediately. So I look forward to doing that with you. And then also, if you go to the homepage, right here at the top, you can get my ebook, which is Background Checks 101, the beginner's guide to figuring out who the heck you're actually dealing with. And when you click there, it'll redirect you. As soon as you pay, PayPal will redirect you to a link where you can download the book. But if you have any issues, just message me and I can send it to you. So let's get going on this new Jay-Z lawsuit. And I have to give you a little backstory so that it makes sense. So basically, Jay-Z, dealing with Tony Busby and Miss Jane Doe, has 3 lawsuits that have been pending. The first one was the New York lawsuit. Actually, before that New York lawsuit was filed, it actually started in California. If you remember, Jay-Z filed in California under John Doe himself, alleging extortion from Tony Busby, extortion and defamation. At the time, he was John Doe, so that no one knew who he was. Then, when we were reading that, we were all trying to guess who it was, and we pretty much guessed that our thoughts were basically Jay-Z or Kevin Hart. My main guess was Jay-Z, because something else was up with Kevin Hart. I don't know. I don't remember what. And then Busby went ahead and filed his lawsuit in New York. In doing that, oh baby, he filed it the night before Blue Ivy was making her red carpet debut for The Lion King. I think of all the different ways in which they went about this litigation, that infuriated Jay-Z the most because he felt it was a deliberate attempt to both pressure Jay-Z into settle something where he feels he's innocent, but also to prevent him from being able to walk his daughter Blue Ivy down that red carpet. Because of course it was a Disney movie and Disney absolutely does not want to be associated with anything of the sort. And sure enough, Disney basically initially had told him they didn't want him to walk her down the red carpet, and he was adamant. Hit that like button, guys, as you come in. We've got over 100 in the chat, but we've only got like 20 likes. He was adamant. So, and that goes all into the pain and suffering. So just to recap, the initial California lawsuit was extortion, and there's a defamation claim. Then in New York is where Busby sues Jay-Z with all of the SAR word allegations. And remember, it was both Jay-Z and Diddy. And then on the eve of a deadline that Busby needed to basically get his act together with his filings on that file, the case was dismissed. This lawsuit goes into the reason this lawsuit is filed is basically because remember I did a video before where I explained that not only did Jay-Z dismiss or was the lawsuit dismissed against Jay-Z by Busby, but that no money exchanged hands. I also explained how the law in New York works, which is that Jay-Z had filed a motion for sanctions against Busby. He was seeking millions of dollars. I think it's going to be like 20 million in sanctions due to the fact that he felt Busby filed this without doing the appropriate due diligence, and that if he had done that due diligence, he would have seen that his client's claims were lies and that it wasn't a valid lawsuit that should have ever been filed. Well, under New York law, The sanctions that he was wanting, which was money, you can't get those unless you first show that you have presented the evidence of the lies to the other side and given them a chance to dismiss the lawsuit. That happened, and then Busby dismissed the lawsuit. But here's the thing. In order to save face, Busby filed a declaration from his client saying, no, it wasn't that there wasn't sufficient facts. My client asked me to dismiss the case because Jay-Z's team was harassing her and she was scared of her life. This lawsuit is based on that affidavit. This lawsuit is saying now we're suing you because y'all straight up lied in court to the court and to the public. That Jay-Z's lawyers are saying we never harassed her. That never happened. And the truth is you dismissed the case because you knew there was no evidence. It was never dismissed based on us threatening her. And if there were any threats made, it wasn't by us. You guys made that up. So basically, yeah, as Annie is saying, he's an extortionist. So the most important thing to understand is because some people are like, well, why did he file this in Alabama? This is Alabama. A few reasons. This is Alabama federal court. Let me tell you something. Alabama federal court is one of the most conservative federal courts in America. They do not like extortionists. They do not like ambulance chasing lawyers because those people in Alabama are hard workers. This jury is going to be filled with people all over. It's the Southern District of Alabama. So Mobile, outskirts of Mobile. And what those people don't like is when people get up there and they lie on somebody to try and get a quick 20, 30 million, right? Because these are hardworking farmers and other type of hard workers who may never see that much money in their whole life. So what you're not about to do is come into a courthouse in the federal. See, federal is way harder to deal with than state court because state court judges are appointed. You know, they really care about what the public thinks of them because they got to get reelected. Baby, federal judges, they don't care because it is a lifetime appointment. So it's important to understand that as you're looking at this. And so here we're going to now break down. We're not going to do every single page because we don't need to. But the main thing to understand as well is in the California lawsuit. Now, I've said this before, that what's really messed up here is it's almost impossible to get money for defamation when if the defamation is pertaining to an attorney's statements pertaining to a lawsuit, because there is an absolute immunity for attorneys if and only if the statements are being made in good faith pursuit of litigation. What Jay-Z is arguing is it should be defamation because this was not a good faith pursuit. This was an extortion attempt. And so if he can show extortion, he's right. He can get paid for defamation because you cannot be extorting somebody in a good faith attempt of litigation. So that's how that goes together. Also, in the LA case, so I believe the reason he filed another lawsuit, right? The LA case wasn't looking that great for Jay-Z. Why? Jay-Z had 6 different reasons, 6 different statements that he claimed were defamation. The judge has already thrown out half of those, and the judge said he was going to throw out the extortion attempt unless Jay-Z came up with more facts. In other words, it wasn't looking good because if he throws out the extortion attempt, that basically was going to throw out the whole case. Therefore, he files in Alabama, which he totally can, because old girl lives in Alabama. You can always file where one of the defendant lives. She lives in Alabama. He's seeking about $20 million. So he can do that in Alabama. And if you have to pick between a California court and an Alabama court, oh, baby, you definitely want an Alabama court if you're in Jay-Z's position. Because, you know, a California jury is going to see Jay-Z, this multimillionaire, is like, you don't really need the money. Versus an Alabama court is going to see Tony Busby, more likely will see him as an ambulance chaser and this girl as a liar. We're about to break down the accusations and why. And you tell me at the end, who do you think was likely telling the truth? I want to hear, do you think this woman dismissed her case because she was scared of Jay-Z, or do you think Tony Busby got in her ear and there was more to it? All right, so here's what I'm going to start with. It says these allegations, false, malicious, strategically calculated, and timed to inflict the maximum pain and suffering on Mr. Carter. Remember, The night before, he's to walk the red carpet on this Disney event with Blue Ivy. And it says, and in conspiracy with multiple lawyers, including defendants Anthony Busby and David Fortney, who, like her, the victim, were soullessly motivated by greed, in abject disregard of the truth and the most fundamental precepts of human decency. It says, these are the only truthful and fair descriptions of Jane Doe and her lawyers. Malevolent, I can't ever pronounce the word, malevolent, whatever, efforts to, basically it means just like evil efforts to assassinate the impeccable and lifetime earned character of Sean Carter. All right, next, we're gonna go to the next paragraph because we get it. Well, it says, as Sean Carter, who is professionally known as Jay-Z, but more importantly, is known as dad and husband and son, and a decent human being who did nothing to deserve or elicit the wanton, depraved attack that Jane Doe, in conspiracy with her lawyers, launched to extort Mr. Carter beginning on November 5th, 2024, through a menacing private demand letter. So that's interesting. The demand letter came out just this November 5th, and Jay-Z really hopped to it in filing his extortion lawsuit later that month. It says Doe and her lawyers then brought before the world an in-court complaint, the impossibility and indeed absurdity of which was surpassed only by its vile malevolence in a desperate attempt to leverage Mr. Carter. When in their initial extortionate demand letter failed to yield the financial windfall they sought, and after Doe told Busby, with whom she had never spoken before, the demand letter was drafted and sent, that Mr. Carter did not me, Busby then, quote, pushed her towards going forward with the false story against Mr. Carter to make the case better and get them, the lawyers and her, more money, quote unquote. Specifically, Busby brought Jay-Z into it. This is the allegation from Old Girl. It also says Busby then went forward with naming Mr. Carter with full knowledge by him, as imparted to him by Doe, that Mr. Carter had never hurt her. And Doe's entire story as it related to Mr. Carter was completely fabricated. In other words, hear what they're trying to establish. Number one, that's important, is that before he filed this, he is in Busby, he never spoke to Doe. That's critical because the judge in the LA case said, you got to come up with some proof of extortion. One type of proof of extortion would be if you're able to show that he filed this before ever talking to the client. Because in order to show extortion, you have to show that the demand was made without any legitimate plan to pursue a lawsuit. And so what they're saying is there couldn't have been a legitimate attempt to pursue a lawsuit if you never talked to the client first to even see if it's a legit client. It says, Doe has now voluntarily admitted directly to representatives of Mr. Carter that the story brought before the world in court and on global TV was just that, a false, malicious story. So allegedly, Jay-Z had investigators that came to her house and she told them, hey, this really didn't happen. I told Mr. Busby this didn't happen. And he pursued these anyway. Now, that's an interesting claim because as lawyers, you're not supposed to talk to someone you know is represented by counsel. Even if you send like an investigator, my understanding is that you're supposed to talk counsel to counsel. I believe, though, that the law pertaining whether an investigator you hire can speak with them is a little more gray, in the same way that, police officers or whatever like that. It could be more gray. I am not sure about that, so feel free to correct me down below. But it is very clear that her attorneys and attorneys for her side feel like, oh, no. Any statement that he got from Jane Doe while she was being represented should not be admissible. It says she has admitted Mr. Carter did not hurt her, and that indeed it was Busby himself who she met for the first time at a coffee shop in Houston on the day of her maliciously fake NBC News interview, which is discussed later in detail, who pushed her to go forward with the false narrative of assault. Now, here's the thing. I do believe that Mr. Busby did not meet her until the day of that interview because it was obvious nobody prepped her for that interview. And I don't know how you let a client go on NBC News without having been prepped for that type of interview. That is beyond my mind. There's no way he met her beforehand, because a conversation with that lady will let you know this lady is like slow, and she don't need to be taken to the public. Oh, you can't hear me? Let me see. Yeah, it's fine. Yes, it says yes, because somebody can be behind all 150 Jane Does. Yep, get those likes up. Didn't NBC own Peacock? Yes, they did. But the point is, you don't ever allow your client to be interviewed by anyone without you speaking with them first. However, here it appears that that's exactly what happened. It also says, to compound the egregious harm, just last Friday, Busby and Fortney's counsel, a prominent New York lawyer in the now dismissed false action against Mr. Carter, threatened Mr. Carter's counsel. Now, here is where the new extortion attempt comes in, y'all. Pay attention. All right. And it just happened last Friday. It said a prominent New York attorney in the now dismissed false action threatened Mr. Carter's counsel to double down with yet another false public statement by Doe if Mr. Carter publicly revealed her admissions, the admissions that she was never actually hurt by Jay-Z, and Busby and Fortney's misdeeds, as in convincing her to lie, in Mr. Carter's pending California lawsuit against Busby. In other words, they said, if you tell the world that she came out and said that she lied and that we convinced her to do it, then we are going to double down to the public that she dismissed it out of fear. The problem with that is the dismissal out of fear, right? It's going to further ruin Jay-Z's rep, because it came off as though, okay, it was dismissed based on lies. It says, fortunately and clearly unexpectedly from their perspective, Doe, Busby, and Fortney were met with nothing but righteous resolve at every turn by Mr. Carter. He stood steadfast, publicly decried the lies being put forth against him, and beat the evil conspiracy among malicious Doe and her malevolent, soulless lawyers, driving them back into the shadows from which they came, resulting in the voluntary dismissal with prejudice without settlement of their false claims. Again, here's the other thing. Today is March 4th. All right. No more of these claims against Diddy, against Jay-Z. No more of these can be brought because the window closed March 1st. That was the last opportunity to bring any such claims. So that's why I have trouble believing that, oh, she just dismissed it out of fear versus dismissing it because the facts don't support. Because if that fear subsumes, there's no time for her to rebring it. She can never, ever again bring it. That's why I believe it was right. And also, remember, she was Jane Doe. The public doesn't know who she is. Jay-Z's a legal team, though, does. It says Mr. Carter does not commence this action lightly. Following her admissions that she lied about her claims against Mr. Carter, her lawyers have continued to seek to hide this reality, including through further extortionate threats and demands by Busby, Fortney, and their New York co-counsel. Even after all this, Mr. Carter does not expose his malicious and wrongful accuser's identity in this complaint, seeking to maintain her an anonymity as Doe. They actually filed something to say, we like to proceed as Doe. And I think it's in part because you'll see later down in here, they believe that she's not okay. Okay. We know she's slow. I don't know. Can you still call people slow? Put in the chat what I'm supposed to call her instead. We know she's slow and she's got a variety of mental health issues. Listen to this breakdown. After hiring Busby law firm, Doe falsely accuses him of assault and written correspondence, court filings, and global TV. It says Doe appears to be suffering from personal and financial hardship. Y'all listen to this. She lost custody of her kids, and her parents, who on information and belief support her, recently filed for bankruptcy. Desperate to obtain a payday, she hired the Busby law firm, which has a long history of whipping up a media frenzy with vague and sensational claims against public figures to extort payments from Mr. Carter under the threat of devastating harm to his reputation. Let me tell you something. This is probably why when they were doing the settlement mediation talks back in November, they didn't want to release her identity. Because Jay-Z's lawyers, you're going to do this kind of due diligence to be like, okay, who is this person that's accusing me? What are they going through? Who are they? What could be their incentive to lie on me if allegedly, it was a lie? It says, as discussed below, Doe first attempted to extort Mr. Carter through an extortionate demand letter and an anonymous lawsuit, both from Mr. Busby. When Mr. Carter refused to capitulate, Doe doubled down by using the justice system to attempt to ruin him by formally naming him in a complaint making horrific false allegations. And when that also failed, she resorted to defaming him on global TV. It says a simple Google or other public record search of Doe by Busby and Fortney would have casted doubt on her credibility, revealing that, among other things, less than 90 days before sending the demand letter, she had been in court on mental health related issues in connection with her second-degree assault charge, and had her bail revoked for failing a drug test. Okay, let me tell you, as attorneys, all of this goes into, this could have got Busby in big trouble. Remember, he was able to get away and no sanctions because he dismissed it before Jay-Z was able to proceed with his sanctions motion. Because in New York, Jay-Z had to give Busby a chance to let it go. But a court would see this and be like, wait a minute, you're dealing with someone with mental health issues who's also on drugs, pretty much in the time period where they're contacting your firm and pursuing these claims. All of this goes into their credibility. It also says, B, she has several mental health disorders and takes multiple medications, according to testimony from her psychiatrist laid bare in public court records. In other words, records Busby or anyone else could have found if they chose to. And C, she made 3 other SA allegations, which were either dropped or dismissed by courts. Now, see, that's the kind of thing I would want to know before bringing such an allegation against anybody in civil court. If I was Busby, I would want to know that. I need to see every one of those allegations, because guess what? Those defendants that were on the other side of those cases could be the witnesses that kill my case. It also says Doe sues Sean Combs entities, alleging she was SA'd at an after party following the MTV Awards. And basically, we know that that couldn't have been true. I'll skip down to that. She said it was when she was 13 that a friend dropped her off at Radio City Music Hall in New York so she could try to attend the VMAs on September 7th, 2000. Although she was unable to talk her way into the VMAs, a limo driver purporting to work for Combs invited her to, quote, an after party. Later that evening, the driver took her to a large white house with a gated U-shaped driveway 20 minutes away. And after accepting a drink, she felt woozy. It became evident that Doe did not initiate this legal action with a legitimate purpose. Instead, the lawsuit was filed with the intent to extort. Part B, Doe sends Mr. Carter an extortionate letter falsely accusing him. All right, we knew about that. Jumping down to 20 said, it says Doe threatened to, quote, take a different course if Mr. Carter did not commit to, quote, confidential mediation to resolve this delicate and important matter by the deadline of November 19th, giving Mr. Carter only a 2-week window before she would go public with her false allegations. To avoid both public and criminal exposure, Busby stated his client wants something of substance by way of settlement. Remember, wait. Remember, Busby said, we never asked for money. Something of substance. What do you want, a hug, an autograph? We all know you don't have to ask for money. This is a civil case. You can't force someone to go to jail. The only thing you can get in a civil case is, in fact, money. So it's disingenuous for Busby to say, we never asked for any money, when you clearly stated you wanted something of substance by way of settlement. What that means in civil litigation talk is we want a substantive number, not something nominal. Nominal would be 30,000, 50,000 when you're dealing with the Jay-Z. That would be something nominal. Substantive would be $1 million and up, or $500,000 and up, 6 figures for sure. However, Doe had already sued Mr. Carter, albeit as one of the Does 1 through 10. Doe's plan was as clear. She was demanding that Mr. Carter either pay something of substance to stop her from making public the wildly false accusations that would subject him to oppression and irreparable harm, or endure financial and personal ruin. Her statements and correspondence made clear that the immediate and extensive threat of exposure if he didn't pay. It also said, C, Doe amends her lawsuit to falsely allege that Mr. Carter SA'd her. So this is when she amended it to actually include his name. Then she went on the TV show, it says here, It says during the interview, which was set up by Busby, I'm on 34 at the bottom, she was given, which was set up by Busby, was given on a voluntary basis and in the presence of Fortney. She lied about Mr. Carter to a global TV audience. In addition to attempting to explain the impossible, how she, as a 13-year-old from upstate New York, wound up in Manhattan at a private VMA's after party with countless celebs, Doe told NBC News how she spoke with musician Benji Madden and his brother at the after party. She recalled talking to Benji, quote, about his tattoos of the Last Supper because she has a religious background, so it was something to talk about. She repeated her claims while at the after party she had a drink that made her feel woozy. Doe told NBC following the alleged SA, she found her way to a gas station where she called a daddy to pick her up and drove her home. She states her daddy did not ask her what happened, what she did, or where she was. Instead, rode home in silence for 5 hours and 47 minutes. And all of these were demonstrably false. So this goes into, says first, all the ways it was false. First, Doe stated the assault occurred at a residence. Mr. Carter is at no such residence. Indeed, NBC's News located photos of Mr. Carter from that evening, showing him at a party at a commercial location. The now closed Lotus nightclub in New York City, Exhibit 3. Of course, a private nightclub cannot be mistaken for, quote, a large white residence with a gated U-shaped driveway that included a large living room or foyer. Even Busby admitted to NBC that Doe does not claim the assault occurred at Lotus nightclub. Second, she told NBC she spent 20 minutes in the limo before arriving at the residence. However, when pressed about these details in a follow-up interview with NBC, she admitted she didn't know where she was going or even how long the drive took. Worse, she conceded to NBC that she, quote, guessed about the length of time of the trip had taken in the lawsuit. Third, as to her description of supposed conversations with Benji Madden during her conversation at NBC, a rep for Madden confirmed to NBC neither he nor his brother attended the 2000 VMAs and that they were on tour in the Midwest at the time. Fourth, regarding her long pre-dawn drive home with her daddy, her dad told NBC News he doesn't recall picking her up, which unsurprisingly would have been something that definitely, quote, would have stuck in my mind. He said he learned of the alleged SA when she was interviewed by NBC News in December, and that he did remember once picking her up in the middle of the night, but it was a local drive. He definitely would have remembered driving 5 hours and 47 minutes to pick her up. And there were countless other falsehoods in her allegations, it says. For instance, despite alleging it took 20 minutes to get from Radio City Music Hall to the after party, there was no house matching that description. So we've got a bunch of the lies. She waited months before dismissing her false complaint and did so after being lied to by her attorneys. Now that's critical. Let's jump to this. This is new info. Carter made several court filings repeatedly detailing the faulty of her claims. That is true. At each of these junctures, Doe was confronted with the false nature of her claim, as well as the harm it was causing Mr. Carter. At any of these points, Doe could have withdrawn her lawsuit. Nevertheless, she continued to pursue these claims without regard. She has now admitted that Mr. Carter did not hurt her. Instead, that Busby, aware that Mr. Carter did not do this, pushed her to make the false claims for money. Having already sent the false and defamatory demand letters, having filed the false complaint, and having already set Doe up to give a false interview to the news, Busby, Fortney, and the law firm were happy to perpetuate lies and hold out hope for an unwarranted payment from them and Doe. Instead, Busby went so far as to tell TMZ, already fully aware of the lies, having met with Doe in Houston, that Doe was, quote, not ruling out filing our charges against Carter, and that what happens next is, quote, up to my client. Busby had signed the complaints in the action against Mr. Carter without being admitted to the bar of the U.S. District. Now, this is the important part. When the judge presiding over the case was advised of this, she issued an order dated January 28th, requiring him to, quote, file proof of admission on the docket by February 14th. The very next day, Busby applied for admission. On the 13th, a day before his deadline to file proof of admission, he got the news that because he'd already filed pleadings in New York without being admitted, he was denied. He was rejected. He was also instructed to attach a copy of the denial order to any subsequent applications for admission in the particular case, meaning it wasn't just going to stick with this case. There's a good chance that any future cases he could also be in trouble for. Faced with his inability to comply with the judge's order in the case against Mr. Carter and facing a threat of punishment by the court, Busby dispatched Fortney to Alabama to meet with Doe that same day, February 14th. This is very important, y'all. During that meeting, Fortney falsely, maliciously, and manipulatively told Doe that the case against Mr. Carter needed to be dismissed as Mr. Carter had made threats against Doe's life, and it was too dangerous to continue with the case. Of course, no such threats had ever been made. Let me tell you this. In other words, what Busby had done could be seen as malpractice. So to cover up his misstep, this is alleging he blamed it on Jay-Z. Also, keep in mind, this case could have still been pursued with other lawyers. Busby is not the only lawyer in the world that could have sued Jay-Z for this. There's a New York law firm that's on this case. They could have continued to represent Jane Doe on this if these were in fact valid claims. So do not get mistaken. It does not make literal sense to dismiss this case because of the threats, right? Or for him to dismiss the case simply because of the bar issue. Because all you have to do is get any other lawyer to proceed on the case. But if what he did was lie to his client and get the client to dismiss a case with prejudice that, according to him, was a valid case, his license will be in jeopardy. It says rather. And honestly, this strategically was brilliant, because if that's true, and if we know that this woman is hard up for money, so if this lady believes she was lied to by Busby to dismiss what could have been, $1 million case, because even though it didn't, $1 million case, excuse me, then potentially she could have a malpractice lawsuit against Busby for millions. But I say this to say, Busby wants everyone to believe the case was dismissed for a threat against Jay-Z, when Jay-Z's claim is it was because the bar was about to, if he hadn't dismissed it based on these facts, he would have owed sanctions in millions to Jay-Z for filing this false lawsuit, as well as he wouldn't be allowed to continue proceeding because he didn't complete the proper paperwork. Remember, which is just the basic pro hoc vice paperwork. It says, rather, Busby and Fortney were desperate to withdraw the case or face punishment in court for their actions in filing a false pleading without Busby even admitted an SDNY. In other words, Busby wouldn't be able to practice in any of the federal districts, probably for a long, long, long time. So he couldn't file any more of the lawsuits. And again, he would have been sanctioned for both filing a false case as well as not being admitted. It's the filing the false case which gets you in big trouble, and would have made him liable for millions. So in other words, rather than Busby going to his client and saying, hey, we're dismissing this case because I think you're lying, he's saying, hey, we have to dismiss this because Jay-Z's threatening you. That is a defamatory statement that absolutely you can recover for, even though it was made by an attorney to their client. If that's not true, then that's absolutely defamation. That would be an exemption to the protections lawyers usually have. It says, but the threats of extortion did not end with the dismissal of her lawsuit. Rather, Friday, February 28th, Doe admitted all of the foregoing, and after Busby became aware of those admissions, a prominent New York lawyer serving as Busby and Fortney's co-counsel called an attorney for Mr. Carter. During that call, Busby and Fortney's New York co-counsel threatened that if Mr. Carter's lawyers filed anything in Carter's pending extortion and defamation case in California against Busby related to the statements made by Doe fully exculpating Mr. Carter, meaning finding him to be innocent, and inculpating her own lawyer, Busby, for extortion and conspiracy, Busby would issue a public statement by Doe that, number one, she was being harassed by Mr. Carter's people since she dropped the lawsuit, and dropped the suit only because she was afraid for her life and that the allegations against Mr. Carter in the dropped suit were all true. Of course, Doe's allegations about being harassed by Mr. Carter's people since she dropped the suit and about her reasons for dropping the suit are and always were false. When Doe, Busby, and Fortney and co-counsel said these statements, they knew have discovered through any reasonable inquiry these statements were false. That's the standard to win. That's the standard. Knew or readily could have known with a reasonable inquiry that this was false. Thus, the threats of extortion and further defamation continue to this day. All right. It says, I'm going to read some of these comments and then I'm going to just break down the cause of action. It said, child, let me see. Hit that like button. They would have taken that case if this was true. She wouldn't have no problem with representation. Right. He is in trouble 150 times, all the lawsuits. It says he's going to come for Google. Fernando, you see, he goes for the money and they both were their hurt. So no, absolutely. Somebody said Ariel Mitchell needs to fall back to child. Can Jay-Z ask for her name to be released? It's interesting that you say that because let me see if I can put it on the screen. No, I cannot. He actually did the opposite. He has asked, can she continue to proceed as Jane Doe? And here's why. I believe he feels like she is someone that suffers from mental disorders that is being manipulated by Mr. Busby. Therefore, it does him no good to release her identity and further allow her to be abused and manipulated by the public, because that's not his approach. I think in doing that, let me tell you what that does with the judge. That is going to get his legal team, Jay-Z's legal team, the utmost credibility, because it says, Your Honor, we're not here to drag this lady. We are here to get justice because she has been used as a ploy by her attorney, Tony Busby. And the way that this was structured, that it is structured where they can, Jay-Z's law firm, Jay-Z as a victim can receive millions both from Busby and Busby's law firm. And by him adding Jane Doe on there, guess what it incentivizes? Jane Doe is ultimately probably going to have to get her own lawyers because there could be a conflict of interest. What he's alleging is that her lawyers manipulated her. That means Jane's going to need her own lawyers. I bet you Jay-Z's legal team will allow her to be dismissed in exchange for some type of affidavit where she puts all the blame on her lawyers. I would do that strategically because think about it. You're not going to get a dime from this hillbilly sitting up in her Alabama trailer. Baby, I love a good trailer. Wallpaper, no paper. Some of them trailers got granite countertops. Let's talk about it. But this little hillbilly, she don't have a dime to give to you. You see her, she don't even custody of her kids, and her parents that are bankrupt taking care of her grown self. So I say that to say, I would not be surprised if Jay-Z's legal team uses her to get to the real source, which is Busby. Because without putting out that fire in Busby, he is going to keep manipulating poor people who are seeking justice or windfall or whatever. Now, let's quickly break down. You see what he did to that man who kept saying Jay was his dad. Oh, I did hear about that case. All right, so let me just quickly break down the causes of action. The first one is malicious prosecution. So that's just where you're saying, you knew good and well I didn't do this, but you keep using the legal system to harass me. And remember, I said it's a lot, and this is what you do when basically someone is committing defamation, but if it's related to a lawsuit, it's much better to go this route, malicious prosecution, because you don't have to worry about any immunities applicable to lawyers for defamation. All right. The second count is abuse of process. It is a lot like malicious prosecution. What it is it's literally abuse of the legal process by lying. This is saying she sent the extortionate letter, and that after he refused to capitulate, 78, to the extortionate demands, Doe, through her lawyers, made good on her threat and formally named him in the lawsuit. That defendants either knew that the statements were false with reckless disregard to the truth when initiating the proceedings, and that Doe used the news and the media to publish them. It says Doe's lawsuit lacked any probable cause to believe, and honestly, it's why there were no criminal charges that went along with it. This outlines again the lies and that the defendants acted with malice in pursuing and initiating the meritless lawsuit against Mr. Carter. Defendants devised and executed their plan to accuse him of this assault and use the national media. Okay. Defendants' initiation and continued prosecution of the frivolous lawsuit was willful and malicious and intended to oppress and cause injury. Basically, this claim is after you should have known that these were lies, you continued with it. That's what would get them in trouble. Third, civil conspiracy against all the defendants. Civil versus criminal just means you are using civil law and that you knowingly and willfully conspired to maliciously prosecute or abuse the legal process against someone. Here, Mr. Carter. That's third. Fourth is going to be defamation. Now, this one is against Doe. See, one thing I know, y'all, is defamation law. Hold on. Let me show you something real quick. You see this? The defamation is only against Doe because of what? Because what I taught y'all before. Let me go here. Defamation against Doe only. You see, he did not sue Tony Busby for defamation. Why? Because of the immunity for lawyers and how it's really, really tricky. But against Doe is a lot easier because of the different instances that we went through. So this also helps answer the question that so many people say is, "Ooh, can Jay-Z sue them for sue her for defamation?" And I said before, it's really, really difficult. That's why he did not sue. He can't sue Tony. He can sue Tony Busby for defamation, but it's extremely difficult to win against a lawyer. It's a lot easier to win against the client. I hope that's clear here. And it says, so that's what he's brought these claims for. And here's the thing, Jay-Z has the money. This litigation is going to go on for a really, really long time. I see Tony Busby wanting to take it to trial because he's Tony Busby. He's Tony Busby. And there's not amount of money that's going to protect that, that Jay-Z's reputation is worth. So in the end, those are the claims. And what is the most surprisingly and astonishing here is that allegedly Jane Doe admitted to Jay-Z's investigators that her lawyers coerced her, is what she's saying now, into pursuing these allegations, as well as that in order to cover up what her lawyers had done, they went and lied to her and claimed that Jay-Z was threatening her. Here's the thing that I want to know. What were the threats? This sounds like a really easy thing to prove. Because all her lawyers have to do is say, hey, these were the threats that Jay-Z's people made. If it's a threat, was it via phone? Was it, what was it? And what was the threat to do? Was it to bankrupt her? Was it to break her legs? Was it she'd never get her kids back? It's odd to me that the threat would be made to the lawyer and not to the client. That just doesn't make sense. Y'all let me know in the comments, whose side are you leaning to with this? Number one, do you believe that Jane Doe really told one of Jay-Z's investigators that the claims were a lie and she finally came and told her attorneys they were a lie, but the attorneys said, let's pursue it anyway? Number one. Number two, do you believe that Jay-Z's attorneys were threatening her after the dismissal? Here's the thing. It would make more sense to me that the threats would be pre-dismissal versus post. Because remember, the allegation was that February 13th. No. It was right at the time of the dismissal that those were the threats. And that on February 28th, there was the additional threat that if Jay-Z came forward and said she admitted that this was untrue and had told her attorneys, that they would come forward and make her say she dismissed the case out of threats. Yeah, this has all just gotten so ugly here that I do feel that in some ways this victim was likely manipulated by her legal team. I have also seen attorneys who make mistakes, like how Mr. Busby made the mistake of, not properly filing pro hoc vice and therefore could not continue to represent her in this New York case anyway. I've seen how they try and cover their butts by doing things like, oh, let's dismiss this and let's blame someone else, because they don't want a malpractice case. Now, with malpractice, you still, in order to win a malpractice case, right? Jane Doe would still have to prove she could have won her underlying lawsuit, But I could see a lot of law firms that practice malpractice law saying, I will happily take your case against Mr. Tony Busby, because number one, we know Tony Busby has malpractice insurance. Abso-freaking-lutely. And that could be a way to have gotten an easy million off a demand letter. An easy million off a demand letter. But it likely, if that lawsuit had been filed, oh, baby, Jay-Z, his legal team, Diddy's legal team, a malpractice lawsuit against Tony Busby would be deadly to his career right now. So we're going to stay tuned on this case, see how it goes. Drop your questions below. But absolutely, Mr. Busby, I wouldn't be surprised if later down the line, this same Jane Doe tries to find an attorney to sue Busby for malpractice, if and only if these allegations are true. We still don't know if they're true. Oh, also, finally, before I go, don't forget, if you believe you are a victim of Christian Gold's, any of his scams, I will drop down below in the comments. There's an email address you need to email to see if you'd like to join the lawsuit. I believe the deadline to do so is March 6th. So chop on that. Check out that video. There's also a whole playlist on Christian Gold. And also remember, Mr. Gold says he's done nothing wrong, that there are always risks with investment, and that these people simply took a risk and it was an unsuccessful investment, but that there was no intentional harm from him. Hit that like button. I'm your legal bestie, attorney Simone, and thanks for tuning in. Let me know what other topics you want me to cover below. Happy Fat Tuesday as well. Bye, y'all.